host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, John Allen Mollenhauer, also known as JAM. Medical professionals are, of course, dealing with incredibly busy schedules. Sometimes through the night they work, and we're the needle movers for medical professionals to help them navigate this stress, beat exhaustion, and focus on what matters. What are these needle movers that we can focus on for them?
That's a great first question because, Doreen, as you know, medical professionals, doctors, nurses, administrators, I mean, they're working with a system that pretty much goes around the clock.
Yeah.
They're not controlling the system that they're in.
Yes.
Even an entrepreneur, typically the client that I work with, an entrepreneur or a business owner, they've got some control over their time.
Mm-hmm.
Professionals, like professional service providers, they have control over their time. Medical professionals, who I have a lot of experience with, interestingly enough, they don't have as much control over their time.
Yes.
If they're part of a hospital system, and particularly nurses who are on call, and a lot of times through the night. So you have to control the controllables. So if we're going to beat fatigue and navigate stress and overcome these things while in the system as it is, we have to focus on needle movers. And needle movers, that's a tongue twister, isn't it?
Yes, it was. That's why I struggled saying it in the beginning.
Yeah, right.
That was a little rough for me, but we got through
Needle
it.
movers.
Yeah, we'll keep getting through it. It's good.
Needle movers are those things that you can control regardless of the circumstances that are going on around you, right? So, like, for example, how we respond to situations. If we're going through a day and we're grounded in our psychology, if you know a little bit about my work, but I teach people how to live spirit-driven lives.
Yeah.
And I came to this realization as an entrepreneur because, as an entrepreneur, you're always putting out fires. You always got this problem, this challenge. You've got ownership of this entire enterprise. And there's always something that's challenging you somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And early on, I used to be so reactive to those prompts, and it would literally, quote, stress me out at the time.
Yeah.
And over the years, I began to practice getting grounded in spirit, right? To take advantage of that space between me and whatever's prompting me, and to not be grounded in my thoughts and emotions all the time, because it's a stressful place to be. If you're in an environment that's constantly stressing you and tiring and burning you out, right?
Okay, hold that thought for one moment, because you dropped a gold nugget there, and I want to highlight it for our viewers. You're talking about in the middle of this this situation that you can't control, there is this space, right? There's this space between our reaction and the circumstance.
Yes.
And you're saying that there's this spiritual component in the middle of it, which I agree with it, right? And most of our theme here is about getting into that part of the brain where you can tap into the spiritual, tap into possibilities, tap into joy and peace and gratitude. And so most of our professionals that have come here, or experts that have come to speak to you, are all giving you little different techniques and ways to get to that part of your brain so that you could use your whole self and function as a whole person. Now, I just wanted to drop that little nugget. I wanted to highlight that because that might have gone unnoticed. So go ahead, jump back in where you were.
No, it's a great point. I'm really glad you put a highlight on there, because there's a space between stimulus and response. Yeah. There's a gap. And I even wonder if it's even part of the brain, or what's actually giving rise to what's powering the brain, right?
Yeah.
Is it part of it, or is spirit actually what's infusing and giving us basically life? It's our life force. It's literally, original substance. It's really what's powering us as human beings. And we can be identified with that
Mhm.
And you can always tell when somebody's identified, with spirit before they are their psychology. You can always tell that person because they're usually very calm. They're usually, you have a grounded sense from them that they're not like frenetic and right?
Yeah.
Because being frenetic in a frenetic situation is a recipe for disaster, right? You've got to be able to look at a be calm and grounded in a given situation and be able to thin slice it and say, that's my next response.
Mhm.
This is where I need to go next.
Yeah.
Not, oh my God, there's a threat.
Yeah.
Because, if let's, there's you've probably, I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but, when does a challenge become a threat? Like when you're in a challenging situation, when does a challenge become a threat? It's when you're under-resourced.
Yeah.
So if there's not enough staff around you to handle a challenge ahead of you, that's going to turn into a threat.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the energy that we need to face the demands, that's going to become a threat because you're under-resourced, right? If we had all the resources, any one of us had the resources to meet any challenge that we're faced, it would stay a challenge and we would handle it. But if we're under-resourced, we're not. And I suspect that medical professionals are often under-resourced in terms of staff, especially the couple of years we just went through, and are probably under-resourced in terms of energy, like not getting enough sleep, not getting enough rest, not getting enough recovery. So you're yanking more of this life force out of you. You're being forced to overexert a good portion of the time. So we've got to stay in this grounded place. Where
Okay, wait. I want to capture what you just said. Let's just slow down for one moment. What you said was that threat, the feeling of threat, which could be understaffing and all of the stuff that's going on around us, is what we already know. We've been talking about this for the whole week. It throws you in survival mode, right? And when we are in survival mode, we can't think clearly. We're not thinking our best because your brain is on high alert and it's sending all of the blood and energy and oxygen and all of the stuff to the big muscles to run, like if we were running from a tiger, right? So we're not thinking as clearly as we can when we're functioning like this. And another point that you dropped there is about energy. And each day we have a certain amount of energy that we have to expend, right? And if we use all of that energy up in the morning, right? We use it all up in the morning. By the afternoon, we're running on empty. It's like running on a car with no gas, right? And we wonder why we're not functioning well.
If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to change the metaphor there.
Yeah, good.
Right? Because nobody yawns for a lack of calories, right? They're yawning because of a lack of power. And that's actually not a gas station metaphor, right? Our tank, nobody's tank is actually empty. They're full of coffee and food and breakfast and donuts and continental breakfasts and sandwiches throughout the day. They're really running on full in terms of their fuel. But what they're limited in is their power. And that's not measured in calories. That's measured in amps. That is literally voltage. So when we say recharge and restore, we're not talking about like take another supplement, have another drink, eat another meal. Okay. We're talking about literally, we've got to recharge and restore the system in a 24-hour cycle, or else you're going to be tired all the time, regardless of how pure the oxygen you breathe and how great the food you're eating. You can still overexert and overexpend the system, because that energy is electrical. And there are really two sources of energy. Well, I'm not going to say two sources of energy. I'm going to say two forms of energy that we really run on throughout the day. And that's electrical and fuel. It's really not that different from a car. In other words, you have battery power and you have fuel in that car, and you need both, right? But the difference, though, between the metaphors is that a car, if anybody knows much about mechanics, a car's battery charges when it's running. In a human system, the body's battery gets run down and it does not recharge. You literally have to sleep, rest, recover, relax. You've got to go to that regenerative, meditative place. You've got to rejuvenate. That's the only way that power comes back. You can't eat it. You can't drink it. You can't supplement it. You can't think positive thoughts. You can't overexert to get that energy back. You can only regenerate it. And that, Dorian, is what I believe is the biggest challenge for medical professionals, is where do I get that recovery during the 24-hour period?
Yeah. So what does that look like practically?
So, well, first of all, to just bring home point number one is that when we're grounded in our higher self, our true self, our authentic self, our true nature, as I like to put it, your true potential, right? It goes by a lot of different names, what we were just talking about.
Yes.
That is a regenerative posture to the world. Because when we're grounded just in our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, we're always spending energy. That's where you're frenetic, right? When we're grounded in our authentic selves, and there's some distance and space between us and the stressor, we're more unfolding. We're more taking the next step, and that's a regenerative place. So that posture alone is huge. And I know we're literally just talking about the tip of the iceberg on that.
Yes.
But if you just get the core concept today, that's what's necessary. And that, I think, is absolutely essential. The second piece is that, medical professionals have schedules that are not usual. They're early, they're late. So we've got to think in terms of the 24-hour cycle for where we're going to build in sleep, rest, recovery, relaxation periods, meditation periods if possible, and you've got to especially have rejuvenation periods. None of these are synonyms, by the way. These are all distinct practices, and they all build on one another like a system. Like, where are you going to build those things in your life? I can't think of a more important set of practices for a medical professional than those 6 habits. They've got to be dialed in. Because what makes the medical person's job so much, if they have access to unlimited amounts of energy, but they don't have the time and space often to do the recuperation.
Yes.
And then that, even though we're health professionals, that's what throws our habits sideways, because when you're tired, all bets are off on how you're going to live your life.
Yes. So
right?
it, like,
Even if you know
angry,
better, you're
lonely,
like,
tired.
give me a cup of coffee, give me yada, yada. You'll eat and stimulate your way through the day, and you'll gain weight, you'll feel tired, you'll feel sluggish, and pretty soon you'll be in the very hospital that you're serving at. So we have to really hit these core, very, very core elements of energy regeneration so that we can meet the demands that you face as medical professionals.
Okay, so let's just talk briefly, because we're running out of time, and I want to honor our clients' time because they have little of it. So quick tips for them to regenerate their energy?
So the minute you wake up in the morning, all right, get grounded, close your eyelids, but keep your eyes wide open and just look around in there. You'll get grounded. That's called the grounded being. You get your brain on the same team with you. And I'm doing it literally right now as we speak. So you can do it no matter what time you have available. Okay. This is what most people would point to as meditation.
Yeah.
And you're completely, you're paying attention, you're relaxed, you're still. If you do that for 1 to 5 minutes, I do little mini meditations throughout the entire day. Yeah. If I even have a pause, I'm usually just chilling. I go right to the ground of being. I meditate. My brain is with me. My brain's not going all around because I'm paying attention to what's in my experience. And that in and of itself will change your life. Not only does it get you oriented around your authentic self, your true self, your true potential, but it's a regenerative place. And, even though meditation is not really designed for stress relief, there's a ton of stress relief when you're in that space. That's number one. Yeah. Number two is that to the best of your ability, you've got to prioritize sleep more than anything else. This is the bedrock of any regenerative effort. When all of us comes into the world, we come in with a contract that 30% is off the table.
Mm.
right? The other, 14 hours, 14 wakeful hours, 14 to 16 wakeful hours depend on that 30%. You have to constantly regenerate the system, as we were talking about earlier. It can't keep going, or else you will literally be tired all the time. The third is proactively yawn. I learned this from a doctor. His name is Dr. Mark Goldman. He's a neuroscientist. And he said that when you yawn, you reset your brain. So when people are hungry, they eat. When they're thirsty, they drink. When you're tired, what do? Do you reach for something, or do you feel the fatigue itself? When it comes to beating fatigue, the fatigue is the answer, because that is the recharging process. So if you try to cover it up, you'll always be fatigued. So you actually have to like step into the fatigue, not misinterpret it like it's a bad thing. You probably earned it, right? Because you just did a whole lot. You served a whole lot of people. So you actually have to step into the fatigue itself, rest into it, and you instantly begin to regenerate.
I love what you're saying, because we all know that the brain has these little cleanup cells that come out when we're sleeping. These cells get rid of all of the proteins and all of the junk that's floating around in our brain and clean the place out, file things in the cabinets, put things where they belong. They tidy up while we're sleeping. And so we need to have good sleep in order for that process to occur and feel refreshed in the morning.
Yeah, it's like you've got to prioritize this more than anything else, because everything else depends on it if you're going to do it well. And if you're going to stay healthy. If sleep is compromised, we could talk about so many other aspects of lifestyle. Every other aspect of lifestyle will be compromised, bar none, period. And you'll never really experience your full health potential because sleep is compromised. So you really have to nail that, and you have to prioritize it almost over everything else. Now, an emergency situation is what it is. And by the way, Doreen, what's really important about this is that the reason why I teach a philosophy called REM, ultimately I teach people how to live a high performance lifestyle, and that's both preventative and reactive, meaning sometimes you don't get enough sleep, which is why we can't depend on sleep alone. We have to depend on other forms of recuperation in the 24-hour cycle, because sometimes we have to make up for what we didn't get, right? But the key is that at the end of the day, we got to live in energy balance. If we're literally spending more energy than we're taking in, and we don't have solutions for that in place, we're literally going to be tired all the time. And we could talk about all kinds of different forms of balance. There's lots of different definitions of balance, but there's one form of balance which you got to get right. It's no different than economics. If you're spending more than you're taking in, you're on a downward spiral, and we want to correct that.
Wow, 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 wow. That is like the nugget to leave on. If you are spending more than you are taking in, you're getting it all wrong.